Ukrainian drones for the third time this month struck an oil refinery in Bashkiria in Ufa, almost 1,500 kilometers from our state border. In general, last night, 5 regions of the Russian Federation were targeted by Ukrainians: Rostov, Ulyanovsk, Voronezh, Saratov and Volgograd. The enemy's Ministry of Defense reports that supposedly 50 drones were shot down. And we know that last night, the operation of several Russian airports was halted in Volgograd, Kazan, Nizhnekamsk, Ulyanovsk, Ufa, Samara and Saratov.
In fact, Russia has changed its tactics for striking energy facilities. Now they attack regionally rather than targeting large facilities, according to the Ministry of Energy. As for what to do during a blackout, we Ukrainians already know very well, but the same can't be said for Russians.
The first to experience all the peculiarities of life during a total blackout were those in the border region of Belgorod. And now there are reports of new strikes on the Luch substation and power outages there. And this is just the beginning. Ukraine will continue to strike at Russia's energy sector.
This is exactly what Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly emphasized. A blackout in Kiev will lead to a blackout in Moscow and beyond. And while we await this development, Vladislav Palivoda has been investigating whether the Russian energy system can withstand these strikes.
For 3 years, Russia has been trying to plunge Ukraine into darkness. Massive prolonged strikes on our energy sector. They happened in the winter of 23, then again in the summer of 24. And now, once again. Yet our energy system is holding on. We have learned to live under blackout conditions, but is Russia itself ready? Such explosions were heard in Belgorod. According to the governor, thermal power plants and electrical substations were hit. The city suddenly loses power. Belgorod was first plunged into darkness on September 28th and then again from October 2nd to 5th. Power problems in the region have already become commonplace. Without electricity, military facilities, the railway and the ordinary Russian people who had so rejoiced at strikes on Ukrainian thermal power plants were all affected.
At the moment, there are partial outages in 24 settlements. 5,400 residents, this includes the Belgorod district as well as the Valoisky and Volokhonovsky districts, the Gavoronsky and Shchebekinsky districts.
Strikes on the border regions of the Federation are a mirror response to our power outages. And Russians should get used to this, especially the residents of those regions from which missiles and drones are launched at us.
Apparently, maybe in Belgorod they feel comfortable enough to keep doing this. Perhaps this is absolutely fair. We told them that they need to understand. If they want to cause us blackouts, we will do the same. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
So that the Russians themselves feel the cost of war.
The traffic lights aren't working. It's dark everywhere here. This is the city center.
Russian propagandists have already changed their triumphant rhetoric and
are openly talking about dark times. How many hours has there been no electricity? Old power substations, new power substations, drones are striking Belgorod region, Bryansk, Kursk, and for us it's all laughs and giggles. Besides the psychological effect, such strikes have
a completely practical purpose. At the same time as the strikes on Russian oil refineries, this significantly reduces the Russian budget and slows down the war machine, because the Russian energy system will recover slowly.
When they unjustly attack us, we immediately have the significant opportunity to receive much-needed assistance and support from the entire global community. But when they launch their assaults against the Muscovites, they are left with only their very own limited resources and capabilities to rely upon.
The unified Russian energy system is centralized, and a strike on one link affects the entire network. All the more so because the power grid itself is worn out, since the Kremlin spends money on war instead of its own well-being. Their power transmission lines are constantly overloaded, even without strikes from the Ukrainian armed forces. Local outages have become a common occurrence.
They have a huge problem. They need to connect their cities and link their networks together. So, while after these strikes we are developing our network and have expanded our capacity to import electricity from the European Union, the Russians, on the contrary, disconnected from them a week before the full-scale invasion, and that's why they have a problem in the south as well.
Another difficulty for Russia is the shortage of spare parts for repairs. Right now, Russia can restore energy facilities relatively quickly, but in the case of constant strikes, they will lack spare parts, software, and technology, in particular due to sanctions.
Russia is forced to look for, let's put it this way, cheap substitutes, but cheap means lower quality. If a power plant, for example, replaces certain critical technical components with lower quality substandard parts, it is highly probable that these components will inevitably fail on their own over time.
And in the end, it's the ordinary Russian who will pay for everything. Because in the future, energy prices will rise. And it seems that Russia's prospects will remain bleak.
If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin should know there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia.
Lidislav Palivoda, We Are Ukraine Marathon, United News.
This week, the European Parliament called for lifting restrictions on Ukrainian strikes against Russian targets using Western weapons. Because so far, we have been hitting enemy targets exclusively with domestically produced drones and missiles. In addition, the EU has announced that it will adopt another package of sanctions this month. And Russian lobbyists in Europe are finally changing their political direction, including in Bratislava and Budapest.
For example, Hungary has supported the ban on the supply of Russian liquefied gas to the EU. And Slovakia, for the first time, has volunteered to provide military aid to Ukraine. What influenced Fico and Orban so much? Anna Hrishina knows.
Engineering equipment and 5 Bozena demining vehicles. Slovakia will provide these to Ukraine for the first time in 2 years. The memorandum was signed this week. Now Europe is wondering what exactly influenced Robert Fico, who throughout his premiership was against providing military aid to the armed forces of Ukraine. However, diplomacy may have played a role here as well. Those personally acquainted with Fico say the politician has always been known for his pragmatism. That is, after meeting with the Russian dictator in Beijing in September, and then, a few days later, with the Ukrainian leader in Volgograd, the Slovak Prime Minister began maneuvering between energy dependence on the Kremlin and the desire to avoid negative consequences from the EU.
It may not seem that way based on what is published in the media or regarding assessments of political decisions. But as the Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic, I want us to have good, friendly relations between our countries.
The Slovak Prime Minister also agreed for his country to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine. He also promises not to hinder its European integration. What is the reason for such a change? According to Slovak political analysts, Fico is primarily concerned about his personal rating. Because of internal divisions within the coalition, early parliamentary elections are possible next year. And the Prime Minister's position is not very stable right now.
We want to get rid of the remaining Russian oil and gas that is coming into the European Union. We want to do this before 2027. The introduction of tariffs is meant to push Budapest and Bratislava to stop their purchases. Ursula von der Leyen is the president of the European Commission.
But Slovakia is against the ban on purchasing Russian nuclear fuel proposed by the European Commission. Therefore, it declares that it will not support the next package of sanctions. However, it is ready to compromise if Europe offers a reliable alternative supplier. Meanwhile, Hungary has already supported the embargo on the supply of Russian liquefied gas. That is, it has agreed to vote for the 19th package of sanctions. Although earlier, Budapest had tried to secure exceptions for itself. It is likely that Orban's rhetoric changed after the massive drone attacks on the bloc countries. It was the Hungarian Prime Minister who made a loud statement about the need to respond to drones.
Shoot them down, that's all. If there are drones over your territory that do not belong to your country, shoot them down, of course.
However, they are not planning to give up Russian oil, which Hungary receives through the Druzhba pipeline, despite EU pressure. Austria is also stalling new anti-Russian restrictions, demanding the unfreezing of Russian assets in the EU. Yet despite everything, Russian influence in the EU is weakening. It seems that European countries have finally realized that the Russian threat concerns not only Ukraine, but themselves personally. A vivid example, the pro-Russian party that won the elections in the Czech Republic did not refuse military support for our country within the framework of the collective agreement bloc. From Brussels, Anna Krishchini, Ukraine Marathon, United News.